few months ago at one of our Presbyterian meetings, one of my colleagues was preaching. He used to pastor at Covenant Presbyterian Church in Austin, Texas. And he told a story that struck me very deeply as a parable worthy of our time today. He told the story of a cattle ranching conference that took place here in Texas a number of years ago, in which cattle ranchers from all over the world showed up to share about the industry. It was an industry convention. And it turns out one day after the conference was over, hanging out at the bar, some of the Australian cattle ranchers were talking with some of the Texas cattle ranchers. And the Texans were saying, how is it that you managed to put your beef on the market at such a reasonable rate? Because what's killing us in Texas is the cost of keeping our fences up. We're constantly having to, make the perimeter, put new poles in, run new wire, in order to keep our cows where they belong. And it's costly. It costs a lot of money to do that. It takes manpower and it takes materials. And how do you guys do that in Australia in such a way that you can keep your costs down? And they kind of looked at each other and they're like, what do you mean fences? We don't build fences. And the Texans were astonished. Like, what do you mean you don't build fences? How do you keep your cows where they belong? Like, well, it's really pretty simple. We dig a very deep well that will always have water available. And because our climate is so dry and because the cows are always so thirsty, they don't go very far from our water. And so by having a deep well that is always available, the cows stay close by. I want us to think today about that deep well. What is that deep well? What would that deep well be for us? And we know a lot about fence building, especially right now. We're building fences on our border. We're talking about building more fences on our border. But even in the church, we build fences. We build fences of rules and regulations that define who's in and who's out. In a recent retreat that we did for our Philippians project, I was sharing with folks from some of the other congregations how in our congregation we have people serving in the committees of our church, even in our personnel committee, who are not members formally of the church, but who give their gifts because they are part of this community. And they were astonished because you really are supposed to only let people inside the fence do certain things, according to some mindsets. But we build fences around the means of grace. You can only come to the table if you're tal cual persona. You can only be baptized if you're actually a member in the church. You can't get married in the church if you've been living together. There's all kinds of ways in which religious communities build fences. Fences to define who's in and who's out. Fences to keep people here out of guilt or obligation. Fences that we think are good for the church. But my reading of this text indicates something different to me. My reading of this story of Jesus' encounter with the Samaritan woman tells me that Jesus has a different mindset, one that perhaps has been forgotten along the way as the church has attempted to control and define who's in and who's out. Jesus, I think, cares more about digging a deep well and offering that gift of water freely than he cares about the dividing lines and the fences that we seek to use to determine who's legitimate and who's illegitimate. So let's look at this text for a second. Jesus is traveling from southern Israel, Judah, up through Samaria to get back to Galilee, where he was raised. And in that journey, he passes through Samaria, and his disciples go into the village to get some food, and Jesus is thirsty. And so he goes over to the well, but he's sitting at the well, and he can't get any water because he doesn't have a bucket, right? Nothing to get the water out of the well with. Now, I don't know how many of you have experience with that kind of well. I've got a little bit of experience. When we were in Guatemala one year, I think you guys were on that trip when we dug that well. Yeah, Helen and Hiram were on that trip. We started digging a well for a campground for the indigenous Mayan community in the area of Chimaltenango. And we had to dig that well by hand. We had a little kind of 30-inch hoe, and we drew a 1-meter circle, and we started hacking away at that circle. And we just kept going a little bit at a time as we went down. And so it didn't take long before, you're in a 12-foot deep hole, and it's only like this big around. There's not a lot of room to move around in there. If you're claustrophobic, forget it. You got a bucket to put your dirt in, you got your hoe, and you got yourself, and that's about all that fits in there, right? And then people pull that up, and we managed to dig 30 feet down, but it took 100 feet to hit water. You got to pull every bucket up 100 feet for water. Now, Jesus had nothing to pull water up with, and so he's sitting by the well, thirsty, and while he's sitting there, a woman comes out to him. And the first thing that's odd is that a woman would come out in the middle of the day, because normally the women came out in the morning to get their water. This woman comes out in the middle of the day. And there's a lot of commentary around why that might be. But this woman represents a lot of things that are on the outside of the Jewish fence, as it were. First of all, there was a fence between men and women in public. Men were not supposed to engage women in the public. They were to speak with one another behind doors or walls. And so, for Jesus to knock down that fence and ask this woman something in public was the first fence he tore down. The second fence is one that the woman articulates. She says, "How is it that you, a Jewish man, am asking me, a Samaritan woman, for water from my cup? Because you know as well as I do that Jews and Samaritans do not share the same cups." We used to do that here in the States. We had a colored water fountain and a white water fountain, and a colored bathroom and a white bathroom. And in the church we had the colored balcony and the pews down here for the white people. We know about those kind of walls and those kind of barriers because we've had them. We still do, some places. But Jesus knocks that one down and says, "No, I want to use your cup. I don't care about that fence. I don't care about that rule. I'm going to sit at your lunch counter, as it were. I don't care about that rule that seeks to separate us. I am thirsty for something different. I am thirsty for a community where those dividing fences don't exist any longer. I don't know about you, but I am thirsty for that community." And then there's the fact that women still are not treated the same. You know, the variance between men and women back then was shown in certain ways, but it's not like it's disappeared. All you got to do today is look at how much a woman makes compared to a man who does the same job. It's like what? 70%? 80%? All you got to do is look at the way some people dismiss the testimony of a woman who was sexually assaulted just this week across the whole country, to realize that women are not considered with the same gravitas as men yet. So we've still got work to do on that front. We still struggle with the kinds of divides and divisions that don't let some people use the things that other people do. At Walmart just yesterday, or not Walmart, at Sam's just yesterday, we went to check out. And one of the checkers was Muslim. She had her head covered. There were long lines in all of the other lines. There was nobody in her checkout. Now, nobody said anything with their mouth, but I could feel the unwillingness to engage a person who was Muslim in the checkout counter. And then the last criteria that Jesus just doesn't care about is this woman's sex life. Go get your husband. Well, I'm not married. You know, you're right, you're not. You've had 5 husbands, and the guy you're with now isn't your husband. And you almost are ready for Jesus to go, so you better get that straight. You better go get married. Right? But he doesn't say that. He doesn't say, you better go get married. He says, I've got something to give you that's even bigger than this water from this well. And she says, I want that. I want that. I want what you have, because clearly you are a person who doesn't care about the fences that have fenced me in for the entirety of my life. You care about me. And so, after this conversation, her heart and soul are filled in a way that makes her want to share what she has experienced immediately. And so in John's Gospel, the first evangelist is a 5 times divorced woman living with a man out of wedlock. She becomes the first evangelist of Jesus' good news. Because you see, she experienced a deep well instead of a fence. Now I want you to think a little bit about this church, this congregation, and your experience here. Because one of the things that our session is going to be thinking about and talking about is what is the well that we offer? What is the unique, deep well that is our identity as Divine Redeemer Presbyterian Church? And the way I want you to think about that is this. What is it that draws you here? What is it that keeps you close, like the cattle in Australia, so that you come back to this well over and over again? What is the quality of your experience in this congregation's life that draws you? And I want you to take just a couple of minutes to share that with somebody around you. Just what is the quality of this congregation's experience that brings you back? Is it teaching? Is it preaching? Is it the family, the community? Is it the work we do in the neighborhood? Is it none of those things and something else completely. I don't know what it is, but take a moment and share with somebody around you what it is that draws you and keeps you close and coming back for more about your experience here. A couple minutes. Friendship.
And, you were downtown on Houston Street, Greg, architecture store. You went to good work, you get the color, and you let them in, to the white, and you were back. Here you
When's that operation of yours happening?
During the summer. Oh, that's great. Right up from the rest of
The procedure.
And somewhere early in the morning, get over there, and people want to make coffee, like that, let's go around. Well, let's hear the background.
Over. That's where I'm at.
It takes the guys when the men are break, they don't come in, and they just give you, right? And the whole thing. It takes it like when they make it, in the kitchen, everybody else,
Thank you for sharing with each other. I wish I could be a little fly on the wall of each of those conversations, but I'd be eager to hear over the course of the next days, any of you who want to share that either in a little email or a text message or something, to just let me know what it was that you identified. I'll tell you what it is for me. The things for me that keep me here are that I can be myself here. That I can be true to myself here. That I can tell you what I think and express what I feel. That I can be sometimes a little raunchy in the way I articulate my feelings. And you all will hang with me and not crucify me for it. I appreciate that I can enjoy a margarita and not feel like I'm going to be judged. I know. I appreciate that you're a church that shares honestly the things that hurt with one another. Because it means I can share honestly the things that hurt when I need to as well. See, for me, that authenticity is absolutely essential to my ability to be pastor in a church. And you all have allowed me to be that. Today, the millennial generation is leaving religious communities of every stripe in such enormous numbers. And their principal complaint is that they cannot find authentic communities. And they will not abide communities that are unwilling to be real and honest about themselves and about their lives. And I think that's part of what Jesus was able to be with this woman at the well in Samaria. It was real and honest and able to transcend the divisions that had existed between their sexes, their ethnicities, and their religious identities in her marital history. Fences that had bound her, that had chained her for so long, were cast down, and she was given the opportunity to be free and to be herself. That kind of authenticity is what I have to have in a community of faith. Now, the other question that this text raises for me is a question of, what am I thirsty for? What is the ache in my spirit? What is the longing of my heart? Now, one way to think about that would be to say, what do I long for in my head? Am I a person whose deepest thirst is a thirst for knowledge, a thirst for understanding, a thirst for information, a thirst to know more, which leads me perhaps to want to study and to read and to reflect with other people? Is my deepest longing a longing of the heart, a longing for affection, for community, for engagement, for sympathy, for interconnectivity with other human beings at that level of friendship and companionship? Is that heart longing the piece that is biggest for me? Or is there perhaps for me the longing of the hands, which is the longing to make a difference, to use my skills and my capacities to make some kind of difference in the world? Is that the thing that I long for most? Is that where my heart aches with thirst? I hope that we can be the kind of community that offers something of living water for each of those needs. The need to grow in understanding, to grow in relationship, and to grow in service. I hope that that is who we can be, who we have been, at least in some way. And I will be eager to hear what you have to say about what your own longings are, and what the well water is in this church that has nourished you and that is inviting enough that it brings you back again and again. Because that is probably our deepest gift, if we can name it. And hopefully together we can speak that and then dig a little deeper in the well, so that even more can be offered freely, authentically to those around us. Let us pray. God, thank you for the living water which we have tasted, whether here or in other places. Water that has reminded us how incredibly good you are. Water that has offered us refreshment and nourishment in our spirits. Bless, O God, this congregation's life, that we may be for thirsty souls a deep and flowing well, free and authentically offered, that they too may drink deeply and be satisfied. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.